Good afternoon, everybody. Here's the CoinRoutes team back for another This Week in Crypto. We're doing it one day early, starting it on Thursday, November 2nd, pre-FTX verdict. We'll see what goes on in that. But for now, let's talk about the markets and what's going on. So, Carl, what's going on in the markets these days?
So it's a busy week following the big rally last week. Bitcoin tapped at 36,000, has remained relatively flat since then. Gold sold off the touch, I think it tapped 2,000 this week, and then it's kind of sold off since. Oil down 2%, the S&P down 5%, along with other TradFi assets, up 5%. Sorry.
And I was going to say it's up like 2% today, right?
My apologies there. Yeah, no, the traditional finance asset class has been going up all week. The dollar has remained relatively flat, and one of the big things we've been seeing this week especially is that the crypto industry has lost parity to the S&P and the NASDAQ, and so that's something to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, look, Bitcoin's an uncorrelated asset. Crypto, you might think, is correlated to the NASDAQ because a lot of it is technology, but hasn't been acting that way. I mean, I personally think it's because of the long bond, which, as we mentioned last week, was getting very close to tapped and went through 5%. It's retreated all the way down below 4.7% this week, which is significant volatility for the 10-year bond. I mean, that's not totally normal when rates didn't do anything. Mm-hmm. But, whether it's because there are some people in power who need it to go down, or just market forces taking it back down, and those people are breathing a sigh of relief, it's kind of a big deal. And I think that's why you're seeing the market action we're seeing.
Interesting.
Well, you were mentioning also that Bitcoin, once it was teetering about at 5 or past 5, that's when people look to enter Bitcoin as a crisis asset.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I think that, as the long bond starts to look that the government might be losing control, that is even more reason for people to think, oh God, let's buy something that is effectively a hedge against institutions. Mm-hmm. I mean, at the end of the day, it's funny, I was reading, it was a quote from Milton Friedman in 1999 of all people, talking about the need or the ability for someone to invent a peer-to-peer financial asset. And it really is the goal. I mean, Bitcoin turned 15 this week. That was another piece of news we should have mentioned. So the white paper is now officially 15 years old. And if you look at what's going on, I mean, the goal of Bitcoin, and in fact it was inscribed into its genesis block, was distrust of the bank of the central banks, right? It was about the Bank of England in that case, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, the fact is that Bitcoin is a hedge against that sort of monetary instability, and so when things look like they're starting to go bad, that gets people excited. But the real fact is, and you should talk about this, is, what do you think of having one of the head researchers at Fidelity, or FMR, talk about Bitcoin as exponential gold? I love that title. I thought I'm going to be plagiarizing that for a while now.
Yeah. I mean, look, that was very interesting to me, and I know we've covered in other shows in the past the reasons as to why gold is a hedge against world conflict, why Bitcoin is now falling in that category. To me, and I know a lot of people in the my generation, the younger generations as well, Bitcoin's a very interesting asset class because not only like gold, where it's a hedge against inflation, it's a hedge against the central bank, right? It also has different use cases that gold does not. Now, while gold has spot ETFs, etc., you're not sending gold bars online to use it as a payment source.
No.
You're not using gold to send country to country as a payment source either. And Bitcoin, in terms of just technology, offers a lot more utility.
I mean, not to be maudlin about it, but if you're trying to escape a country and you want to try to take your wealth out of that country in gold bars, not so easy. It weighs a lot. And whereas Bitcoin, you can escape with, pretty much everything, without too much trouble. And that portability does matter. And in a world where people are fighting against inflating currencies, I did a podcast with a guy from Venezuela earlier this week. I mean, it's a lifeline, right? I mean, they care about digital dollars, i.e., stable coins for spending, and their wealth preservation is often in Bitcoin. And to them, it's necessary. It's not a luxury good. It's not something people look at as an investment. It's literally to safeguard their way of life. So it really is different in that regard. So there are two news stories I wanted to highlight before we talk through, some of our predictions and some, client focus. Both out of the UK and both positive for a change, since we like to yell at negative stories. I'm going to try to avoid that for the day. But the FCA announced two things this week that are fascinating. The first one was, I guess it was Monday, they came out, it wasn't the FCA, it was the government, came out with a final proposal for crypto regulations, and it's fairly comprehensive, and there are a couple of things that are really important in it. The first is it's very, very clear. And in fact, the government says they want to make London a hub for digital finance, effectively trying to replicate the success of London in building the Eurodollar market when the US kind of bowed out of that market, 40, 50 years ago? So that's kind of a big deal. But the other part of that really matters for those who care is they specifically said we will not and should not ban DeFi. Moreover, we need to investigate more fully and smarter about how to regulate it. So they're not going to do anything precipitous in terms of distributed finance, and I think that's a very big deal. And at CoinRoutes, where we are innovating in making DeFi cheaper, better, faster, efficient, better workflow, that matters to us as well. So that's the first big story.
Question for you: what does it mean for the United States in terms of our ability to catch up? I mean, are we taking a back seat to the, crypto in general? Are we as a nation going to be left behind if we don't start to catch up in terms of regulation?
I mean, look, we sit in a very painful seat in a way by being here in sunny Miami, or a little bit cloudy Miami today. And that is that our business has definitely suffered because the US government is pushing digital innovation offshore, full stop. Mm-hmm. Does it mean that we've lost forever? No. Does it mean that we're losing now, and if we continue down this path for another 5 years, that we are at serious risk of losing? Yes. So it's a big deal, but the story's not over yet. And the people who win the races are the ones who win in the end, not in the beginning. But right now we're losing a race, and it's an important one because there's not a human being that I talk to in the financial markets who think that future financial markets won't go 100% digital within hopefully my lifetime and almost certainly your life.
Because it's not just that we haven't provided, our government hasn't established any sort of regulatory clarity. It's also, we've been doing, the SEC just subpoenaed PayPal this week.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not.
I wanted to be positive, but just when I thought I got out of here, it brought me back in. Sorry for the Godfather reference, people. But no, seriously, yeah. Of all the people to going after a company that's trying to do things the right way, it just doesn't make any sense. And there have been some pretty impressive screeds written about that. Look, I would rather focus on the positive side. The UK, Singapore, Switzerland, Japan, Dubai and the UAE, and Europe are all looking to embrace digital assets and help foster innovation in a safe, effective manner. Sure. We're not right now. That's wrong. And so, we could talk about individual things all day long, but that's really what matters. And frankly, our clients at CoinRoutes are mostly overseas, and we're more and more moving overseas, and we really don't have a choice about it. I wish we did.
The bummer is, if you look at it, right, the reality is the U.S. government is trying to keep people safe. That's their main goal. They're pronouncing right. Don't use digital currency. Make sure to not use Bitcoin in an unsafe manner. It's funding terrorism. All these narratives they have. The reality is people are just being forced to work through loopholes, right? Where if they fostered a system where they could collaborate with these projects, could enforce realistic regulations, we'd see much better innovation overall.
The word is counterproductive, and you defined why it's counterproductive, our approach, extremely well. Yeah. I think that's the bottom line. Yeah. So, okay, so now we've talked about that, but let's talk about what are we seeing from our clients, how are things going on in the markets, and how do you think that the next week is going to pan out?
Are we doing forecasts now? Should we do our forecast?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, so we were going to add a little segment here where each one of us gets 30 seconds or so to do a little market forecast. I'll start and say that historically Bitcoin has found support and resistance in this 30 to 40K mark. It tested on the way up, it retraced it on the way back down in 2020, and it teetered there for a while before all the SBF and the FTX stuff happened. So, I expect to see some consolidation here before, a potential pullback, but typically what we see is capital rotation moves into the large caps. We've seen Solana rally, we've seen Chainlink rally, XRP too come at a better time, and then that obviously trickles down into the smaller caps. So, I expect to see growth in those coins, but Bitcoin and Ethereum probably just a couple weeks of consolidation before any major movement.
Yeah.
You guys?
For me, I'll be the bearer of bad news. I'll be the bearer on this show. I'm pretty bearish. We have a little bet going. We'll tell you guys the rules of it, filmed on camera. But I would say, capping the high side, I would say 37,500. And I think we retrace down into, I don't think mid-20s, but I would say 29 is reasonable to me. I think the S&P hasn't broken out of its downtrend, and while it has been doing well this week, I don't think it's rallied enough to promote a massive Bitcoin rally up to 50,000.
You guys have a little bet going. Do you want to tell
Well,
the
let's get
audience
my
about it?
prediction.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
as far as altcoin rotation, I think that today's been, the altcoins have sold off a bit against Bitcoin. I don't have a lot of feeling there. I do think that as we clear the first couple weeks in November and we get into more of the holiday season, that Bitcoin will continue to climb the wall of worry. I'd say I don't expect a whole lot in the next week. I would be surprised if the range was any different from 34 to 36 between now and the next time we talk to you in a week or so. But I do expect Bitcoin to climb that wall of worry towards 40,000, hit 40,000 before any significant correction, with two caveats. Caveat one, that the stock market doesn't have a major sell-off because of a geopolitical event. If that happens, all bets are off. Whenever there's a major sell-off in risk assets, all correlations go to 1 and everything gets hammered.
We were saying, Dave, you have 40K, Jacob has 29.
29 sharp.
Well, let's see you guys shake on it. And what
Good luck
are
to
we
you,
wagering?
sir.
It's
See.
just lunch?
Yeah, just a
lunch.
basic lunch. We don't need to have anything major. It's just for pride.
Okay.
It's at the end of the day, no one expects or should expect to invest off of anything. We're not providing investment advice here.
Not financial advice.
And
at
the
all.
reality is the most important thing trading an asset as volatile as Bitcoin and crypto is risk control, and stay away from leverage unless you're extremely professional and understand how it works.
So we'll see back next week.
Yeah.
See who's right.
We will see.
So also in the news this week, we had the SBF trial obviously coming to a close. We'll know whether he's convicted or not, or the more likely he's only convicted on a few. But let's talk about the extremes real quick about what the likely outcomes of this case are and what the implications are. Let's talk about the extremes. I want to see what you guys think about what happens if he is fully convicted for the 115 years that he could potentially be there for.
I win
and then
my
if
bet.
he gets off on all counts, what happens?
Well, if
to
he's
Bitcoin?
fully convicted, I win the bet. Perp walks are generically good for markets. They always have been. And frankly, I'm not a lawyer. I can't speak to all 7 charges. I just know that if he's sentenced, or it looks like he's going for the rest of his life or a large part of his life to prison, people will think the bad guys got punished.
Yeah.
There are lots of conspiracy theorists out there who believe that because he was so politically connected and bought off the establishment, donated to the political establishment, that he's going to get off, and that would sour them on digital assets and crypto still further. And so I think it would be a victory for truth, justice, and what we used to call the American way, for him to actually be, join Bernie Madoff. Well, Bernie's
And do you think
dead.
the opposite of if he gets off? I mean,
If he gets
not
off,
gonna
I think
happen.
market sells off. I think I think you lose a lot of capital in the industry. I think people think that the industry
Just a
the
sham.
world is just a sham, and politics will win out. So that would be a disaster. But look, at the end of the day, we all saw. Double-digit number of our customers either got bankrupted or severely harmed by his actions. We know, we have firsthand information of the wrongs that he did. And the fact is I, like most people in the industry, want to see bad guys get punished.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the repercussions, could you speak maybe to people who did have money in FTX, what they would be looking for? Do you think that's going to be a positive ending for them?
Well, the funny part is it's not looking bad anymore. You can already get 50 cents on the dollar just in the claims market, and those claims markets are notorious for underpricing it. They have a couple of assets that are very important. Solana has rallied dramatically. It's up by almost triple.
Yeah.
It's certainly more than
Do
double.
we think that
since-
the rally
since
has
the
anything to
bankruptcy.
do with status of the case right now?
No. I think Solana is up because more people are believing in the technology these days. And they seem to have the inside track on NFT markets and other markets that are real use cases. The whole real world asset theme benefits Solana as a layer one. So there are a lot of people who are bullish on Solana. Having nothing to do with its kind of less than ideal upbringing, but so be it. And then the other is their AI firm, Anthropic, that they invested in, is worth quite a bit of money. And while it's going to be a while before you're able to realize it, not until it IPOs probably, it looks like a fairly significant return will come to FTX shareholders or creditors, at this point not really shareholders, from that. So, speaking as someone who has a few $1,000s of personal money that's there, I actually have a reasonable shot at getting it back. It'll be like found money that day.
Yeah.
But, whatever. I mean, to put this in perspective, though, it's not all good news. The fact is, like Mt. Gox, most people who lost money in Mt. Gox that could prove it got back more dollars than they put in
Because
dollar
they got
terms.
credited back to Bitcoin.
They got credited back the dollars. And the Bitcoin went up by the time they sold it, whatever, to get recovered. But in Bitcoin space, they got annihilated.
Yeah.
Because Bitcoin is obviously
Yeah.
orders of magnitude higher than it was back then. So, who's to say how FTX will ultimately go? I do know there were multiple businesses that were bankrupted from it. And there was huge human tragedy, and it set the industry back.
It will be interesting to see how much of that capital gets reallocated within the market, and if there's any buying pressure that comes from that as well.
Yeah.
To be determined. I mean, or do people have such a bad?
I don't know that we'll ever know is the true answer to that, because it's such a long-term effect. But there were a lot of people who had to buy, and one of the reasons Bitcoin rallied to where it is today is because people thought they had Bitcoin, realized they're going to get dollars back, wanted Bitcoin as a part of their portfolio, and had to buy back in. So there is that. But anyway, we'll see. Hopefully we'll get a quick answer. My guess is it's a technical trial. It went on for weeks. The odds of jury getting done in a night seems slim, but who knows? Maybe it will happen tomorrow, in which case we'll record another segment.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll see what happens over the weekend, and
make sure you comment. Let
Like,
us know.
comment, subscribe. You know the drill.
Dave or Jacob, do you want 29 or do you want 40?
that's right.
Let's see those
Team bullish.
Not yet.
It's funny. I've spent most of my life as I've been called a perma bear on things more often than anything else in my life. But when it comes to Bitcoin these days, I definitely am more in the bullish camp.
I'm on Jacob's side here. I think you're going to be humbled by the young dogs next week.
Wouldn't be the first time. I play a lot of poker, and believe me, I've been humbled by young guys more than once.
We'll see you next week.
Anyways, guys, till next time. Thank you.
Stay safe out there. So as a postscript to yesterday's recording of our This Week in Crypto, Sam Bankman-Fried was convicted on all 7 counts in what is close to a record time. I was on a Spaces this morning, and all the lawyers were incredulous that it took the jury less than, just about 5 hours to convict him in such an incredibly technical charge. The fact is he's going down, and I personally think that's good for the crypto space. But, Jacob, what do you think?
Well, it was interesting. We were talking about it Friday, and you said markets like perp walks. And what I think this does at the bare minimum is allow people to have faith in the U.S. justice system and their relationship to the crypto market. Look, if he did this in traditional finance, he did this in other industry, it wouldn't be a question. And there were a lot of people on the sidelines wondering because there weren't exact regulations established about crypto. But at the end of the day, wrong is wrong and justice was served. And I think it's good for the market to see that. And it's absolutely something we in the crypto community can rally behind.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you make a great point, which is that there are people out there thinking that because there's no regulatory clarity, you can't enforce good old-fashioned laws against fraud. And this proves that's not true. I think that matters. I think it's an excellent point. At the same time, the average person still thinks that, they arrested and they convicted the guy who invented crypto. I actually saw that on X this morning, and I'm like, no, he didn't invent crap. He invented an exchange, but he certainly didn't invent any of the protocols that had nothing to do with Bitcoin, etc.
Exactly. I mean, look, it's justice finally served, and hopefully people can sleep better. Now, I know a lot of families and individuals were affected by this. I mean, they had their lives' work ruined in some of these cases. And We at CoinRoutes, we hope they get their money back. We hope they still have faith in the crypto industry. And we are alongside you, glad that Sam Bankman-Fried was brought to justice in this situation.
Agreed. Although, as a postscript, it is worth noting that the claims markets are pushing 60 cents on the dollar now, which, considering the people don't buy those things, believing they're going to lose money, that it's actually trending toward people getting more of their money back than in any of the other bankruptcies by a pretty fair amount. It will still take time. Now, that is cold comfort to the dozens of firms that we know about, many of which were our clients, that were pushed out of business by the whole deal. But from an investor point of view, at least outside of the investors, such as our VC friends, who I won't name and shame, who lost money in FTX's equity, at least the people who had crypto there will be getting a lot of their money back.
Yeah. And you said that was due in part to obviously Solana being a big one of their holdings, which rallied heavily.
Yeah, it's two things really. It was Solana, but the bigger one was Anthropic. They made one of their $500 million investments that they stole client money to do, turned out to be a big win. Now, unlike Martin Shkreli, who believed that by being able to make money, even though he was screwing people, that's okay. Judge Kaplan in this case, said that doesn't matter. You stole the money just because you managed to make money with it. That's not a good thing. Stealing is still bad, right? But that is what happened actually. So, we'll see how it all goes. It's becoming interesting. The other interesting sidebar is sentencing isn't due for a few months, and there's a second case with 5 additional charges, most notably the campaign finance ones. Personally, I'd be really surprised if that case goes forward. For one reason or another, I think there are some people who just don't want the dirty laundry of how much money got funneled to politicians in both parties from FTX. I think that will be fascinating. If it does go forward, I think you're going to learn a lot, and there are going to be some very embarrassed people.
Yeah, that will definitely be interesting to see as that unfolds.
Right. Anyway, that's it for now. Have a good one, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.